Hello vinyl community. Today I'm going to talk about music from behind the Iron Curtain. All those hard rock and prog bands that probably slipped a lot of people's attention, who were making incredible music in the late 60s, throughout 70s and the 80s. I've got a selection of some of my favourites here. I'm no expert on this field of music. I have no idea what the bands are singing about, unless they sing in English, which some of them do. But there is some incredible music that came out of Eastern Europe in the sort of Cold War years. A lot of these bands, a lot of these musicians grew up playing in jazz bands, and when beat music and psychedelic music and hard rock filtered into their part of the world, they brought all those influences on board. And to be honest, some of the music out of Eastern Europe far surpasses what was being done in the West. The language barrier might be an issue for some people. Doesn't bother me too much. It can be a bit difficult to stomach when you get a sort of mellower track, a ballad, and then it gets a little bit schmaltzy. But on the rocking stuff, some of the vocals are superb. And also, because a lot of these albums I'm going to show lean heavily on progressive rock, there are long instrumental passages where the vocals aren't an issue. So let's get down to it. I'm going to go country by country. I have nothing from Russia. Don't know why. Never got any Russian rock. I need to look into that. But I'll start with Poland. And one of Poland's best loved hard rock progressive bands is SBB. And this is their second album, Nowy Horyzont. An SBB stands for, depending what biographies you read, the Silesian Blues Band, or Search, Breakup and Build. I like the sound of that one. That sounds like an anti-authoritarian kind of a name, so I imagine that was probably what they were going for. And there's the band on the back there. They started as a backing band for a Polish singer called Czesław Niemann, and they're still going to this day, as far as I know. Produced a lot of albums. Their sound is, certainly on this album, equal parts jazz fusion and spacey progressive hard rock, full of drama, lots of Moog synthesizer, wild distorted guitar, great drum and bass interplay, and some more delicate piano interludes. It's kind of reminiscent of Mahavishnu Orchestra or Emerson, Lake and Palmer, but with very heavy guitar. I mean, really heavy guitar. Lots of it's instrumental. There's the occasional portentous sort of spoken word vocals, and it's really quite superb. Really superb. Very doomy and heavy in places. You get the Moog and the guitar and the throbbing bass all playing in unison sometimes, which creates a really sort of heavy, doomy sound. So I can thoroughly recommend this. Like a lot of these Eastern European albums, comes on in the flimsiest of cardboard sleeves. It's almost like envelope material. And there we go, it's on the Musa label. Of course, a lot of these labels were state-owned, so you get an awful lot of records released on the same handful of labels. I've got a bunch of other SBB albums to show you. I won't say as much about them, but the first album, which is a live album, and again, is absolutely incredible. The level of musicianship is stratospheric. This one you might recognise because I use that picture in my YouTube profile. This is a later album, I think it came out about 80, 81, and they've tone down the heaviness of the guitars in that and go for a more symphonic prog sound. Still very highly recommended. The album Memento, superb, as are all these albums. I'm not going to show you anything that's not superb, to be honest. Pamięć, the third album. This one, I won't attempt to pronounce that title, but again, a fantastic album. Just the 2 tracks on this album, so you're in for some full-on self-indulgent prog fusion goodness there. And then we get on to another Polish artist, and this is Myra Kubasinska and the band Breakout. The album's called Ogien, and this is either Myra's second solo album or Breakout's 6th album, depending on whether you see this as a solo release or a band release. It's progressive blues rock. It's moody and it's atmospheric. There's a track on here. Fortunately, they've translated the titles, so I don't have to attempt to pronounce them. But the second track on the first side, The Great Fire, features impassioned Polish vocals, but not your normal hackneyed blues shouter type of vocal. Myra has a really, really good voice, and I'm tiring of the sort of Janis Joplin wannabes. It's good to hear somebody really singing. There's a very menacing sort of cello riff in that song, although it's probably not cello, it probably is a bowed guitar, I'd have thought. The last track on side 1, Leaves Being Swept by Wind, has a very mellow baroque sound. It's very reminiscent of the Rolling Stones' Lady Jane. Just a sort of circular guitar riff and a vocal over the top. Really beautiful stuff. Back to the heavy blues on the B side and a bit of a psychedelic edge here and there. In fact, the final track, You Gave Me a Ring, sounds almost like Stray with Sonia Christina from Curved Air singing. So, brilliant album, thoroughly recommended. We'll stay in Poland for the time being, and a much more straightforward hard rock, heavy rock album by Test. This came out in 1974, heavily influenced by Deep Purple and Uriah Heep. The guitar player on here is an absolute legend. His name's Dariusz Kozakiewicz, and his playing is very reminiscent of Robin Trower at times. And there's the band. Let's see what label this one's on. It's on ProKnit. Get that so you can see it more clearly. And as well as the sleeves on all of these being thin, one thing you might find when you pick these up is that because access to Western music was very limited behind the Iron Curtain, homegrown bands sold a lot of records, but they were played to death because people didn't have huge record collections. So condition can sometimes be a bit of an issue when you're picking these up. But those pops and crackles, that's all part of their history. You just have to think what they've seen people through. But yeah, this is a fantastic album, I say. Lots of hammered organ, very Deep Purple, Uriah Heep. There are some mellower tracks which might turn some people off because then the sort of slightly more histrionic Polish vocals come to the fore. But when this album is good, it is really good. The guitar player is fantastic. Okay, staying in Poland, a bit of symphonic prog from 1981. And this is Exodus and their second album, Supernova. This one's, like I say, symphonic prog, heavy on the synths, a early on in the album, it reminds me of sort of neo-prog, sort of Marillion, Palace, that kind of thing, with elements of 70s, yes. But as it goes on, it draws in other heavier influences. Good vocals on this, nothing over complex in the songwriting. Probably the highlight is a third track on the B-side called Dreszczy. That's Dreszczcze, which starts sort of dreamy and mellow, and then it gets pretty intense, even with a sort of all too brief, aggressive stab of sort of Dave Gilmour-esque guitar. Yeah, apparently their first LP is their best. I've not heard that, but I can recommend this one. Well worth investigating. And now we'll go to Czechoslovakia, and a band who are considered legends over there, and quite rightly so. They started out being called Blue Effect, and that's how they're known a lot of the time. But I think they fell foul of the Czech authorities for using a anglicised name, and they became Madrid Effect, or M Effect as they're also known. And this album, Nova Syntasa II, which translates as New Synthesis 2, is an utter classic. This came out in '74. It's their fifth LP, and this features a Czechoslovak radio jazz orchestra. So you can hear perhaps influences of Deep Purple's Concerto for Group and Orchestra, but even more so the title track of Uriah Heep's Salisbury album. It's got that real, what can I say, it's almost a big band, heavy rock sound to it. Absolutely brilliant. I mean, the horns and strings aren't just nailed on for the sake of it. They're an integral part of the sound, and it is a big sound. Jazzy, it's symphonic. There's some incredible guitar playing from Radim Hladik, who also is the composer of this piece. An incredibly talented guy. It's brilliant, absolutely brilliant, cinematic in its scope. First side is taken up by one single track. Side two is more of the same, but nothing can quite compete with that side-long track. So, an essential purchase. And this is on the Panton label. I've just noticed there's an insert tucked away in here as well, which actually it's in Polish and in English, so you can read the song titles and the little brief biography on there. But yeah, this album is an absolutely incredible album. What artwork! That's another thing. So many of these albums have amazing artwork. Absolutely beautiful. And we'll stay in Czechoslovakia and stay with Madrid Effect and this album, Madrid Effect and Radim Hladik, which has been reissued a number of times and also goes under the name Benefit of Radim Hladik. This came out in 1975. Again, some beautiful artwork. And this one's much more of a guitar-centered album. The orchestra has been given the elbow. And this one's heavy fusion-style progressive rock. Loads of propulsive bass, a sax and flute on here, some tasteful Fender Rhodes piano. I guess there's a sort of Camel feel to this. Some of the guitar playing sounds very sort of Steve Howe influenced. It gets funky at times. And highlights probably the 12.5-minute track at the end of side one, Hypertens, which has loads of wailing guitar, squawking sax, and a choir of angels in the background doing their sort of best Uriah Heep vocal harmonies. It's largely instrumental, so foreign language vocals turn you off, this could be one to check out. And superb musicianship throughout, absolutely incredible. And again, in Czechoslovakia, this one by Dezo Ursini and his Provosorium album from 1973. And this one is on the Supraphon label, which is a label you will see a lot when you're digging through Eastern European rock music and classical music as well. I think they're big on that. Basically, it's a state-run label, so whatever was released in Czechoslovakia, a lot of what was released in Czechoslovakia, ended up on the state-run label. So this is the only album that Ursini did which featured English vocals. He plays guitar, piano, and he sings. It's bluesy in parts, has lots of angular, jazzy elements to it. Suppose the closest comparison I've come up with when I've listened to it, it's kind of bands like Colosseum, a bit of Emerson, Lake and Palmer perhaps, Rare Bird, and kind of the Canterbury prog sound. A slightly creepy vibe to the whole album. I think there's a lot of organ there, and there's a darkness to it. The whole of the first side is taken up with one track called Christmas Time. No sleigh bells on that one, but there are tubular bells, a very ominous tubular bells pattern with some heavy guitar soloing over the top of it. Lots of flutes and sax. It's a great album. There's even a track on here, Apple Tree in Winter, which kind of reminds me of Nina Simone's Feeling Good. It's kind of a melancholy piano organ ballad. Really very good. So yeah, again, highly recommended if you can find that one. And again, from Czechoslovakia, slightly different on this one, a band called vbear, who were formerly known as Pražský vbear. Again, band from Czechoslovakia, also on the Supraphon label. This came out in '88 and might be a bit more of an acquired taste. It's very quirky and intense. It kind of combines programmed drums with sort of spiky new wave art rock and heavy metal riffs and screaming guitar solos. I mean, really screaming guitar solos. It's really heavy stuff. Then again, sometimes the guitars have a sort of chic Prince funk feel to them. The vocals are intense. They remind me of, if you're familiar with the French band Trust, their singer Bernard Bonvoisin, and also Alex Harvey at times, David Byrne, and then you get these odd little operatic moments. I've no idea what the Czech lyrics are about, but the intensity just suggests that there's something political, I think. The 80s drum sound is off-putting for about 10 seconds, but then it all makes sense, and it's almost like they're trying to deliberately play with the expectations of people who are into art rock, progressive rock, that kind of thing. And it certainly is progressive. Plenty of time changes and lots of ambition. I mean, if this was, if Frank Zappa or Todd Rundgren had a hand in this, it'd be, very, very highly acclaimed, no doubt. But perhaps not for the faint-hearted, that one. But good album, really good album. Still in Czechoslovakia, that country did produce some fantastic music. And a symphonic prog album from Progress II, called Dialog s Vesmírem, which translates as Dialogue with the Universe. And this is a rock opera which came out in 1980. So it's symphonic progressive rock with some fusion elements at times. The tracks will segue into one another, which gives it a nice sort of concept feel. It's all Czech vocals. Guy's got a decent voice. There's some very modern sounding, edgy guitar on here. Really good rhythm section. Tasty, burbling synths, but nothing cheesy. Considering the date, I'd have expected it to be bordering on cheese, but not at all. It's a really good album. In fact, the first track has a sort of synth motif in it, which really reminds me of something from Music for the Jilted Generation by The Prodigy. I love that album. That's a dance album for people who are into their rock, and makes me wonder whether Prodigy had heard this, because the synth motif, like I said, is really, really similar. So yeah, this is great stuff. It sounds like the best of classic 70s prog mixed with more recent progressive sounds. Doesn't sound like a 1980 production at all. So yeah, that one's a bit of a classic of the genre, I think. And again, beautiful artwork, absolutely beautiful. Now we'll go to Hungary, and while we're on the subject of artwork, look at that. And this album by Solaris, title translates as The Martian Chronicles. This came out in 1984. It's all instrumental, or at least any vocals on here are so heavily treated they're pretty much unrecognisable as the human voice. It's electronic, spacey, symphonic prog, which sounds, I suppose, like Camel jamming with Vangelis or Jean-Michel Jarre. Lots of 80s synths, piano, nice, tight, gritty guitar riffs, and tons of flute. So if that sounds like your bag, you could do a lot worse. And this is on the Start label, I think it is. And yeah, thoroughly recommended. I bought this on the strength of the cover, and I'm not being disappointed at all. That's beautiful. Okay, still in Hungary, and this lot are probably Hungary's best known rock export. Probably the best known of all the progressive and hard rock bands that came out of Eastern Europe during the Cold War years, and that's Omega. And this is a compilation album that came out in 1975, and it compiles material from 3 LPs that they released between 1973 and 1974. And this was released only in Germany, the US and Canada. And it's heavy rock / prog rock with loads of Hammond and Moog and Mellotron, guitars up front, English vocals and English song titles on here as well. It's very much in that Uriah Heep, Eloy style. Apparently earlier albums have a more Beatles-influenced psychedelic feel to them. I need to check those out, I don't have those. And the back catalogue of this band can be a bit confusing, as a lot of their LPs were issued in both Hungarian and English, often with different track listing, different titles, different covers. So yeah, a bit confusing. You have to tread carefully, probably try before you buy. But this is a really great album. They have had some international success. They did tour outside of Hungary in the 70s. I think toured in England and Germany. There you go, it's on the Bacillus Records, the Bellephon label. And I can recommend this compilation because it really does, well, it's consistent. It picks tracks which all have that sort of heavier hard prog style. So other albums are great. I've got a number of those, and I might show you some of those another time, but this was where I started, and I can recommend it thoroughly. And finally, going back to Czechoslovakia, and I kept this one till last just because I think it's more of an acquired taste than any of the others. It's a weird old album, it really is, and I love it. And again, really interesting cover art. So, like I said, from Czechoslovakia, it's Pavel Hamel and Prudy, and the Slechakova Princessna album. I'm assuming Princessna means princess, and there she is, ice skating on a psychedelic ice cream sundae. This came out in 1973, and trying to describe the music is almost impossible, but I'll have a go. I would say it is an orchestrated, big band, progressive, psych pop fairy tale for children that will appeal to adults. There's gentle, charming Czech narration throughout, which lulls you into a bit of a false sense of security, because you also have apocalyptic horns that bring to mind Ride the Sky by Lucifer's Friend. There's moments of early Deep Purple Hammond and guitar dueling, but that's juxtaposed with forays into Dixieland jazz and Baroque pop. It's an insane album. It's absolutely insane. I mean, I think some people will struggle with the amount of Czech narration in it. And particularly sometimes the narrator seems to have some kind of cocktail party going on in the background. But it's brilliant. I just love the thought that in 1973, Czech families were sitting down with their preschool children to listen to this fairy tale album, which is covered in loads of heavy acid guitar. I mean, wow, I'd have loved that when I was a kid. Imagine having that instead of Pinky and Perky or whatever I grew up with. So yeah, absolutely brilliant album. It's on that Superfon label again. I love this album. It won't be for everyone. I think more people probably hate it than like it or love it. But I think it's great. Yeah, nothing else. There's nothing else quite like it. Absolutely brilliant. So that's it for now. I do think that Eastern European Cold War rock is going to be the next thing that collectors get into. Krautrock, particularly the original albums, has become ludicrously expensive. And great as it is, there is other music out there waiting to be discovered, and there's a lot of great Eastern European music. The artwork is fantastic. The musicianship is just beyond spectacular. I mean, these guys, presumably there wasn't that much to do behind the Iron Curtain with all the restrictions placed on them, so they just practice their instruments, and the musicianship is incredible. So do yourself a favour, look some of these up, discover some stuff for yourself. If you discover anything I've not mentioned, please post a comment. I'd love to have a heads up on some other stuff I might want to check out. And yeah, don't dismiss them. Do not dismiss them. There's some incredible stuff coming or came from Eastern Europe. All right, I hope you've enjoyed this one, and I will be back again soon. Take care. Bye for now.